Last week you announced a new dashboard on the government website of retained EU law, a dashboard that anyone in the country can go and look at and see the thousands of pieces of EU legislation that are still on our statute books. What's the idea behind this dashboard?
The idea behind it is partly that people can look at it and say, why have we got this ridiculous rule? And I'm encouraging people to do that. I was actually talking to the fishing industry yesterday, the Scottish fishing industry, with David Duguid, who's a fellow Member of Parliament, brought some constituents in. And in my briefing it said there are 499 pieces of EU law that affect the fishing industry. And we want to help the fishing industry, and therefore I said to them, please tell me, which of these bits are most onerous, which get in the way of you doing what you're doing efficiently, and then let's see if DEFRA can review them and ideally get rid of them. And that's the process, that we want to look at every law in turn and say, is this law really necessary? Does it actually help the economy? Because we've got a cost of living problem. How do you deal with the cost of living problem? You tighten monetary policy, which the Bank of England's doing. You tighten fiscal policy, which is happening. But you also need supply-side reforms that make things cheaper and easier for people.
Is fiscal policy being tightened? The Prime Minister's boasting of 37 billion in extra spending.
In real terms, yes, because the spending settlements were based on an inflation rate of about 2%, and inflation rate is now 9%, so there will be real reductions in the available public expenditure. They haven't been increased to meet the increase in the inflation rate. So there have been some ameliorations which have an effect, but the total picture will be one of a tightening of the fiscal situation.
See, this is interesting because it's not something that many of your colleagues in the Cabinet have articulated in terms of how to deal with the causes of inflation. We hear so much about how the government is dealing with the consequences of inflation, but when it comes to those causes, the government hasn't really been saying that it does want fiscal tightening.
It is fundamental to understand the causes because, bear in mind, inflation hits the least well-off in society the hardest. It hits the elderly on fixed incomes, and it hits the young who are just starting on their careers, who don't have a rapidly growing income. And this is really important, that we tackle the causes of inflation. And this is doing things that are difficult to do. I mean, increasing interest rates is hard for people. Tightening fiscal policy is hard for people. Therefore, we need to go further and faster with supply-side reforms, because that's the one thing that ameliorates the otherwise tightening situation.